What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, you might be living someone else's life? That the choices you think are yours, the dreams you're chasing, the very identity you've built, might all be an elaborate illusion designed to keep you comfortable, compliant, and ultimately empty. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Onward thinkers, my name is Mister Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. Carl Jung, the master of the human psyche, understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He knew that society doesn't just influence us, it colonizes our minds. It plants dreams that aren't ours, values that don't serve us, and paths that lead nowhere we actually want to go. Jung spent decades studying the architecture of regret. He discovered that most people don't just stumble into unfulfilling lives. They're systematically programmed into them. And by the time they realize what's happened, the window for authentic change has closed. But here's what Jung also knew. The signs are always there, hidden in plain sight, whispered by our unconscious mind, desperately trying to wake us up before it's too late. Today we're going to decode Jung's warning. These aren't just philosophical concepts. They're emergency signals from your deepest self. Ignore them at your own peril. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll explore the 7 signs that you're heading toward a life of profound regret. But more importantly, we'll uncover Jung's roadmap for breaking free before the prison door locks forever. Sign 1. You've never questioned your own desires. Jung believed that most people never ask the most dangerous question of all. Are these desires actually mine? From childhood, we absorb the ambitions of our parents, the expectations of society, the manufactured dreams of media and culture. We become walking advertisements for lives we never consciously chose. Think about your current goals, your career aspirations, your definition of success. Jung would ask, who planted these seeds in your mind? Because if you can't trace a desire back to your authentic self, it's probably not yours. In ancient Greek mythology, there's the story of Tantalus, cursed to eternal hunger and thirst. Every time he reached for fruit, it would pull away. Every time he bent to drink, the water would recede. Jung saw modern life as a form of Tantalus syndrome, endlessly chasing satisfaction through borrowed desires that can never truly fulfill us. The psychological mechanism here is what Jung called identification with the persona. We become so fused with our social mask that we forget there's a real person underneath. We optimize our lives for applause from audiences we don't even respect. In today's world, this manifests as the epidemic of successful people who feel empty. The lawyer who realizes they became a lawyer to impress their father. The entrepreneur chasing money they don't need to buy things they don't want. The influencer performing happiness for strangers while dying inside. The antidote is brutal self-inquiry. Start asking, if no one was watching, what would I actually want? Strip away every external voice until you find your own. It's uncomfortable because you might discover that your entire life has been a performance. Sign 2. You avoid discomfort at all costs. Jung had a revolutionary insight about pain. It's not the enemy of growth, it's the catalyst. He wrote extensively about how our neuroses, our struggles, our darkest moments are actually the psyche's way of forcing us toward wholeness. But modern society has sold us the opposite message. We medicate every uncomfortable feeling. We distract ourselves from every difficult emotion. We've built entire industries around avoiding the very experiences that could transform us. The myth of Prometheus illustrates this perfectly. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and was punished with eternal torment. An eagle eating his liver every day, only for it to regenerate overnight. Jung saw this as a metaphor for psychological growth. The fire of consciousness comes with the price of ongoing discomfort. But this discomfort is what separates the awakened from the sleeping. Jung observed that neurosis is often the psyche's attempt to get our attention. Depression might be a signal that we're living inauthentically. Anxiety might be our unconscious mind warning us about a path we're not meant to take. But instead of listening to these signals, we silence them. In our current culture, this shows up as the endless pursuit of comfort zones. We choose easy relationships over meaningful ones. We select careers that pay well over ones that fulfill us. We consume entertainment that numbs us rather than challenges us. Jung's prescription was what he called holding the tension of opposites. Don't rush to resolve every uncomfortable feeling. Sit with uncertainty. Let anxiety teach you about your boundaries. Let sadness reveal what truly matters to you. The people who look back on their lives with the deepest regret are often those who spent their energy avoiding pain rather than learning from it. The comfort zone is where dreams go to die. Sign 3. You've never met your shadow. This might be Jung's most dangerous insight. He discovered that every human has a shadow, the collection of traits, impulses, and aspects of ourselves that we've rejected, denied, or hidden from the world. Most people spend their lives running from their shadow. They construct elaborate identities designed to prove they're not selfish, not angry, not envious, not lustful. But Jung knew a terrifying truth. What you don't acknowledge controls you. The shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It goes underground. It influences your choices in ways you don't understand. It sabotages your relationships. It creates the very problems you're trying to avoid. Consider the myth of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll tried to split himself into pure good and pure evil, but this only made the evil more powerful and destructive. Jung saw this as a perfect metaphor for what happens when we refuse to integrate our darkness. Jung discovered this through his own psychological breakdown. He confronted aspects of himself he found repulsive, his capacity for cruelty, his hidden resentments, his primitive desires. But instead of being destroyed by this confrontation, he was liberated by it. The shadow integration process involves brutal self-honesty. What qualities do you most despise in others? Jung would say those are likely your own projected shadow elements. What do you judge most harshly? That's probably where your own work lies. In modern life, this shows up as people who preach tolerance while harboring secret prejudices, leaders who espouse integrity while cutting ethical corners, spiritual seekers who use enlightenment concepts to avoid dealing with their psychological wounds. The paradox Jung discovered is that embracing your shadow makes you more moral, not less. When you acknowledge your capacity for selfishness, you can make conscious choices about generosity. When you admit your potential for cruelty, you can actively choose kindness. The people who cause the most damage are often those who believe they're incapable of causing damage. Sign 4. You live entirely in the future or the past. Jung understood that time perception reveals psychological health. Neurotic people either ruminate obsessively about the past or fantasize compulsively about the future. Psychologically integrated people can access all three temporal dimensions without being trapped in any of them. This insight connects to what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to bridge conscious and unconscious, present and eternal, individual and collective. When we're stuck in temporal loops, we lose access to this transcendent capacity. The myth of Sisyphus captures this perfectly. Condemned to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to watch it roll back down each time. Jung saw this as the fate of people who can't find meaning in the present moment. They're always pushing toward a future that never arrives, or trying to recover a past that no longer exists. Jung's clinical work revealed that people who live entirely in the future are usually running from present moment pain. They construct elaborate fantasies about how life will be once I achieve X, or when I finally get why. But these fantasies become prisons that prevent them from engaging with actual reality. Similarly, people trapped in the past are often avoiding present moment responsibility. They replay old wounds, old victories, old versions of themselves, because the current moment demands growth they're not ready for. In our digital age, this temporal displacement has become epidemic. Social media trains us to curate past highlights and future projections, while missing the actual texture of lived experience. Jung's solution was what he called active imagination, a practice of engaging with present moment imagery and sensation in ways that connect us to deeper psychological currents. Not escaping the present, but diving deeper into it. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. We've established the foundation. You've learned to question your desires, embrace discomfort, meet your shadow, and inhabit the present moment. These are the defensive strategies, the ways to stop living someone else's life. But Jung's work goes deeper. He didn't just want people to avoid regret. He wanted them to actively create meaning. The next 3 signs reveal the more subtle ways we betray our authentic selves. These aren't obvious mistakes. They're the sophisticated forms of self-deception that educated, self-aware people fall into. What we're about to explore is Jung's map for those who want to do more than just survive. Sign 5. You've confused achievement with fulfillment. Jung made a devastating observation about successful people. He noticed that many of his most accomplished patients, the doctors, lawyers, business leaders, artists, were profoundly miserable. They had achieved everything society told them to want, yet felt empty inside. This led to one of Jung's most counterintuitive insights. External achievement can actually be a sophisticated form of avoiding internal development. We use productivity, status, and accomplishment as elaborate distractions from the real work of becoming ourselves. The archetypal story here is King Midas, who wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. He got his wish and discovered that gold cannot feed the soul. When he embraced his daughter and she turned to gold, he realized that his greatest achievement had become his greatest curse. Jung understood that the psyche has its own logic, separate from social logic. Society rewards competition, accumulation, and external validation. But the psyche seeks integration, meaning, and authentic expression. These two systems often conflict. The psychological mechanism Jung identified is what he called inflation. When we identify too strongly with our achievements, we lose touch with our essential humanity. We become our resume, our bank account, our reputation. But these are just masks, personas we wear to navigate the social world. In today's culture, this manifests as the epidemic of burnout among high achievers. The entrepreneur who builds a successful company but destroys their health and relationships. The artist who becomes famous but loses the joy that originally inspired their creativity. Jung's research showed that true fulfillment comes from what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you uniquely are, rather than who you think you should be. This often requires stepping away from conventional metrics of success. The question Jung would ask is not, what have you achieved, but who have you become? Because at the end of life, you don't get to keep your achievements, but you do get to keep who you've become. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Sign 6. You've never developed a relationship with solitude. Jung discovered something that flies in the face of our hypersocial culture. The capacity for meaningful solitude is essential for psychological health. Not loneliness, solitude. The ability to be alone with yourself without distraction, entertainment, or the need to escape. Most people, Jung observed, are terrified of genuine solitude because it forces them to confront who they actually are beneath all the social roles and external stimulation. Solitude strips away the personas we use to navigate the world and leaves us face to face with our authentic self. The myth that illustrates this is the story of Narcissus, but not in the way most people understand it. Narcissus fell in love with his own reflection, not because he was vain, but because it was the first time he had truly seen himself. The tragedy wasn't his self-love, it was that he could only see himself in a reflection, never directly. Jung spent years in what he called voluntary solitude, engaging with his unconscious mind through dreams, active imagination, and deep introspection. This wasn't escapism. It was the most courageous work he could imagine. He was excavating the depths of his own psyche. The psychological principle here is that external relationships can only be as deep as your relationship with yourself. If you don't know who you are in solitude, you can't offer authenticity in relationship. You'll only be performing versions of yourself designed to get specific responses from others. In our current hyper-connected world, this capacity for solitude has become almost extinct. We reach for our phones the moment we feel bored or uncomfortable. We fill every silence with podcasts, music, or conversation. We've lost the ability to simply be with ourselves. Jung's practice involved what he called confronting the unconscious. He would sit in silence, often for hours, allowing whatever arose in his mind to emerge without judgment or interpretation. This wasn't meditation in the Eastern sense. It was active psychological engagement with the depths of his own being. The people who regret their lives most deeply are often those who never discovered who they were underneath all the noise and social conditioning. They live their entire lives as reactions to other people rather than expressions of their own essence. Sign 7. You've never asked the ultimate question. Jung believed there was one question that separated those who would look back on their lives with satisfaction from those who would be filled with regret. It's not a comfortable question. It's not a safe question, but it's the most important question you can ask. The question is, what is life asking of me? Not what do I want from life, but what does life want from me? This reversal changes everything. It shifts you from a consumer of experience to a participant in something larger than yourself. Jung discovered this question during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of psychological crisis that lasted several years. He realized that he had been asking the wrong questions his entire life. Instead of trying to get something from existence, he began asking what existence might need from him. The mythological reference here is the story of Moses in the burning bush. When Moses encountered the divine, his first instinct was to ask, "Who are you?" But the response was, "I am that I am." And then the more important question emerged, what is required of you? Jung realized that every individual has what he called a personal myth, a unique contribution that only they can make to the world. This isn't about grand gestures or fame. It's about discovering your essential function in the larger web of existence. The psychological insight is that meaning comes not from getting what you want, but from giving what you have. Purpose emerges when you stop asking, "What's in it for me?" and start asking, "What's mine to do?" In practical terms, this shows up as the difference between careers and callings. A career is something you do for external rewards. A calling is something that does itself through you. Jung believed that everyone has access to the sense of calling if they're willing to listen deeply enough. This requires what Jung called active receptivity, the paradoxical state of being simultaneously active and receptive, leading and following, creating and discovering. You become a conscious participant in your own unfolding. The tragedy Jung observed is that most people spend their lives answering questions that were never asked, while ignoring the one question that could transform everything. Your life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. We've traveled through Jung's map of regret and redemption, 7 signs that reveal whether you're living authentically or sleepwalking through someone else's dream. Let me ask you, which of these signs resonated most deeply with your current situation? Was it the recognition that your desires might not be your own? The realization that you've been avoiding the very discomfort that could transform you? Or perhaps the uncomfortable truth that you've never truly met yourself in the silence of genuine solitude? Jung's warning isn't meant to terrorize you. It's meant to wake you up. Because here's what he knew that most people never discover. It's never too late to begin living authentically, but it does get harder the longer you wait. The path Jung mapped out isn't comfortable. It requires confronting parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. It demands questioning beliefs you've held sacred. It asks you to prioritize internal development over external achievement. But the alternative is spending your final years haunted by the ghost of who you could have become. Jung discovered something profound through his own psychological journey. When you align with your authentic self, life begins to support you in mysterious ways. Opportunities appear, relationships deepen, work becomes energizing rather than draining. You stop swimming against the current of your own nature. This isn't positive thinking or wishful fantasy. It's what Jung called synchronicity, the way external events begin to mirror internal alignment. When you're living authentically, the universe seems to conspire in your favor. But this requires courage, the courage to disappoint people who expect you to remain who you've always been, the courage to pursue meaning over money, growth over comfort, truth over popularity. Jung's final insight was perhaps his most important. Individuation, becoming who you truly are, isn't a luxury for the philosophically inclined. It's a psychological necessity. The psyche will continue to create problems, symptoms, and crises until you pay attention to its call for authentic expression. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. Remember this, your life is not a dress rehearsal. This is not a practice run. The person you're becoming right now is who you'll have to live with for the rest of your existence. Jung spent his life studying what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. He discovered that the difference isn't intelligence, talent, or circumstance. It's the willingness to become conscious, to wake up, to choose authentic struggle over comfortable numbness. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges. The question is whether you'll face them as yourself or as someone else's idea of who you should be. Your authentic self is waiting. It's been waiting your entire life. The only question that remains is, will you answer its call before it's too late? The person you're meant to be is worth the person you'll have to stop being. Onward, thinkers.